Before I could speak English, my mother taught me sign language. One of my biggest flexes is that I have a Japanese Duolingo streak of 939 days, and in 2022, I had the honor of being featured as an artist on a compilation album of music performed entirely in the Cherokee language. Language is our greatest communication tool, but as connecting as it is, each language communicates in wildly different ways, each in beautiful and valid ways. I grew up understanding the importance of language diversity because I was fascinated with it. As I've grown, I've started to understand that not all people have the same frame of reference as I do on this topic, which might be why we're in such a never-ending crisis of indigenous language endangerment. The album I was on, Anadane was not just made for fun. It was made because Cherokee is classified as definitely endangered, and it's not the only language classified this way either. There are more than 3,000 languages around the world that are considered endangered. That's 42% of all spoken languages today. There are less than 2,000 fluent speakers of Cherokee, most of them elders. And believe it or not, time exists and people age. The older demographic of speakers is an issue that's only gotten worse with the introduction of a certain global pandemic. The truth is that the Cherokee Nation is the largest native tribe in America. There are so many others with smaller populations, but the same problem. Take Pawnee, for example. There are around 3,000 members of the tribe, and likely fewer than 10 speak the language. The issue is global. The language Pausay, originating in Taiwan's last speaker, died at the age of 96 after giving language lessons to more than 200 people, but her efforts weren't enough, and the language of the indigenous people of Taiwan is now considered extinct. Resigaro, native to Peru in 2017, only had one speaker remaining, after the second to last, Rosa Andrade, was found murdered in her home. We focus on these indigenous languages because 96% of the world's languages are indigenous, yet they're only spoken by 3% of the global population. Sure, there are over 7,000 languages worldwide, but if we had recognized the beauty of language diversity and the issues that it was facing sooner, we could have 10,000, as 2,900 languages have gone completely extinct. These deaths, like a lot of them, can be traced back to colonization. Native people have historically and repeatedly been forced to assimilate to the colonizer culture, or else face death and torture. 1887 in America brought the first ban on native languages in schools, but before that, in 1879, Carlisle Indian Industrial School opened in Pennsylvania. This school sought to kill the Indian and save the man. In other words, they wanted to beat the culture out of children and not allow them to learn about it at a young age. Native languages was one of the things they targeted the most. By changing the children's names and not allowing them to speak their native tongue, they prevented the children from accessing cultural knowledge. Also, children and babies are the best demographic to teach a new language to because their brains are still developing. Carlisle was only the first of many boarding schools to challenge the passing down of indigenous knowledge, culture, and history. By the year 2100, the UN reports that half of the world's languages will be extinct. This is important because language is the most powerful tool that we have. It can provoke someone, teach you new things, but most importantly, it can carry whole cultures into the future. Language is the heart of a culture in many ways. It's how a group of people communicates their knowledge that they have to the next generation. The Cherokee language's syllabary, or alphabet, has 85 symbols. That's 6 vowels, 10 consonants, and 6 pitches. There are swooping, looping, beautiful symbols that make it up, but as pretty and useful as these symbols are, they weren't invented until 1809, which is only when Sequoyah started his journey of creating them. Before this, we only had the spoken word. Without the language, we wouldn't have stories such as Jistu the Trickster Rabbit or The First Fire. And outside of storytelling, it's highly likely that indigenous people have extensive knowledge of traditional medicines and native plants that Western science hasn't discovered yet. The loss of language can be directly attributed to the loss of knowledge. When a native tongue dies out, especially one with a strong history of verbal communication, all of the knowledge that was held in that language and never written down is lost. And even if it was written down, there are major issues with translating cultural knowledge into another language. The Cherokee language is inherently poetic. One word can mean an entire phrase in English, and the words are more than just titles. They're descriptors, literals, and maybe even precise. For example, in Cherokee, the word flower directly translates to the one that blooms. Dying and starving directly translates to death by famine, and there are different words for picking up something alive, something liquid, and something round. The details and mechanics of a language can lend us insight into a culture's philosophy on life. Going back to the translation for flower, the translation refers to it as the one, not the thing. This is in alignment with indigenous philosophies of being equal to and respecting the earth, philosophy that threatened colonizers because of their goals to exploit and command the land. This is different from English because our words inherently frame us as different from the land, framing it as subservient. Translation errors, and there are a lot of them between English and Cherokee, are prevalent in more widely spoken languages as well. The Japanese phrase, mono no aware, is commonly thought of as not being able to be translated into English. We can try with many synonyms to translate it as the feeling and way things affect us involuntarily, the empathy of them, the pathos of them, the impermanence of them. But that long explanation doesn't pack the same punch as that one phrase does, and it still doesn't encapsulate the entire abstract meaning of it. The many languages of this world are beautiful and diverse. One term can have a million different meanings, origins, and uses. With such diversity, it is important that all of these languages work together to create an understanding of the world, not against each other. No one language is better or worse than another. They simply hold different philosophies. Languages, fortunately, are hard to snuff out, especially when there are so many groups of people holding on to them. And revitalization starts with the youth. Language schools are the most obvious way to revitalize a language, but the use of art and entertainment is also crucial. This is partly because all cultures have a history of art and storytelling. The album I mentioned at the beginning was created to inspire the youth to learn Cherokee by modernizing the language, not the language itself, but how it's presented. I've heard enough times to look into it that the Maori, the indigenous culture of New Zealand's film industry, is the gold standard. Not only does putting Maori in film document the language, but it also gives people an avenue to express themselves, influences others to learn the language, and challenges norms in popular media by presenting cultural values. Again, creating modern art in a language reminds people that it is not a thing of the past. I'd be lying if I said that all languages could be saved. But while it's easy to be pessimistic on this topic, the UNESCO, the United Nations General Assembly, has declared 2022 to 2032 the decade of indigenous languages, making this a prime time for revitalizing as many of these native tongues as we can. The Cherokees have an eternal flame that was brought to Indian territory in the Trail of Tears. It is said that when the language dies, the flame dies, and the Cherokees go with it. I am happy to announce that the language is still alive, and so the flame is still alive, and so the Cherokee people are still alive. So it's not too late. But to revitalize the flames of all of these languages, we must keep fighting together, because it's a group effort. Thank you.